It all started because of that old saying, in English anyway, it's a saying that the cobbler's children have no shoes. That is, if your parent makes shoes, then you're the last person to get shoes. It was similar with our website. It was years, and it was so outdated, and it was so plain, and we knew we wanted a new website, but we just never got to it. Well, we finally got to it, and happily, by waiting so long, we were able to move straight to Plone 5, which was great. So it's really our first actual project, not just playing around, but project with Plone 5. So I'll be talking about our sort of what we were aiming to do, the things that we developed to be able to do it, how it all sort of fits together, and that at the end I'll offer just a few reflections on working with Plone 5 since it was our first time. So the requirements for this site, our new site, were to have more imagery, have more visual appeal. We were like so tired of the plain white. So we wanted tiled landing pages so we could easily, change up what the landing pages said, what the message was, that kind of thing. It had to be responsive design. That was just awful on our old site. And we wanted to use Plone 5. So we had a sprint. So this is Orange, Massachusetts in April last year. And we used the sprint, sort of our annual, now traditional meeting, to get together actually in person. And we essentially decided how we were going to tackle this. So the key ingredients that we settled on for sort of the architecture or whatever, how we were going to work, were the following, and I'll talk more about each of these. So dexterity types were key. Dexterity behaviors were key. Plone.app.image cropping was a big win for us. Collective.cover is the add-on that we chose to do the tiled landing pages. We could talk more about that afterwards. Carlos is one of our developers, and he's been very involved in it, and everybody kind of has used it, and we've used it on other projects, and it's kind of been out there and usable for a long time. So that's what we went with rather than something new. Collective.relative slider and collective.isotope are the two new add-ons that we created for this site that we think are pretty exciting and that I'll talk more about. So. Dexterity types, we used the standard Plone 5 types, didn't even install archetypes on the site. We created two new content types for our own use projects and team members. Project is just a place to put metadata about the projects that we have, and this metadata is what's going to allow us to drive all these different ways of looking at these projects and filtering them. So they have a sort of a type or an industry, nonprofit, government, business, education. They have the technology, Plone or something else. We work in other technologies. Our services, quote, a lead image, and et cetera. And then the team member was a way for us. We wanted to have the site be more kind of feature our team, and so we created a special content type to capture things like where you're at. So in the future we can add little maps and things like that. And well, for fun, because almost all of us are some kind of musicians, we added our musical instruments, and that was sort of the design theme for the site. So Chris Ewing plays the gin. You can ask him about that later. So the behaviors that were most critical to us, the image behavior obviously already comes with the image type, but we added that behavior to our project and team member custom types because we wanted those images to be able to be used in displays, cover tiles, and the other displays I'm going to be showing you. The related items behavior, of course, comes with pages. We also added it to projects and team members, and that's going to be an important behavior that we'll use with the collective.related slider add-on that I'll show you later. The collection behavior, and related items collection, we didn't have to do anything. They're just behaviors that come with. So that was great. No work involved there, just add them to the type. We added the collection behavior to those, we added it to pages because it wasn't there before, and we added it to those two new content types. And then we created a new behavior called related slider, which I'll talk about in a second. And we added that behavior to these same three content types, so we could have, so we could display related items in a slider at the bottom. All right, so now I'm going to talk about kind of the development involved and what these things are. Well, obviously we didn't develop collective cover, but it hadn't really been that ready for prime time on Plone 5 before, so we upgraded it to work on Plone 5. Chris and Carlos and David, I think, especially Chris, I think, did a fair amount of work to make that happen. So yay, collective cover now works on Plone 5. And then most of that was really the only development work. We didn't change the way it worked, but we did have to develop these CSS classes to support the various graphical gizmos that we wanted to use on our site. So that was probably the major amount of work involved. We had a full banner, full width banner image. We had basic tiles that were just plain text with a mouse over behavior. We had image basic tiles with a mouse over behavior, and rich text tiles that we added a CSS style to make them vertically centered, as well as obviously you can put in the HTML that they're side-to-side centered, but the vertical centering was through a CSS class. All right, now I'm going to dive into a description of related slider. So it provides this new related slider behavior for dexterity content. It piggybacks on the existing related items or collection behavior, the ones that come from Plone app content types, for the related content selection. And that selection can be either manual, so you have a content item, you want to pick the content items that are related to it to display in a slider. That can be manual in the usual choose your related items type thing, just that normal way that works. Or it can be determined with criteria, which I didn't know this before working with this project, but you can just say, oh, make this content type have a collection behavior, and poof, you get all this groovy UI for setting up a collection, and that was extremely, extremely handy and just the way we wanted it to work. The choice of what the source of the content should be is on the edit form, and I'll just show you the edit form for this. So this is, I'm on my content item. I can either disable the related slider, or I can say use related items, or in this case, use the criteria that I define. And then there's a little section where you can define the criteria just in the usual way, and there's this, and you can define the sort order. And I love the fact that it allows me to choose folder sort order, because some of those things, that's what I really wanted. There was no metadata field. I'd curated the sort order, so that's very handy. And then you get this nice preview window, just like in normal collections, to make sure you're not making some ridiculous mistake. Not shown here because it didn't fit very well. You can also assign a title to the related slider. That was a nice last minute. Oh, wait a minute. I want to call them different things in different places, and I don't want to have it in the rich text, so that's a nice thing too. So what does it do? Once you've set all that stuff up, it adds a viewlet below the content area where the slider is enabled, and it uses jQuery tool scrollable to provide a responsive, manually triggered slider for related content. None of this automatic thing like on our homepage. But click to get the next thing. And it's set up to be able to use images, and of course that was our goal, was to use these lead images in the slider, so we had this nice visual looking thing, but you could also just have a pure text type of display. And this is what it looks like. So, you see the content of the page just a little bit petering out there, and then similar projects is the title I assigned to it, and obviously we did the CSS class to make it pretty with the background, and that wasn't too hard to do because it's all got the classes you need, et cetera, et cetera. And then, yeah, so this is a Plone project, and showing all our other Plone projects. So yay, that was pretty exciting and a pretty cool new graphical thing that we got to use. Currently, as I said, it works with dexterity types, but Alec Mitchell was the main lead developer. He assured us it could be extended to support display of related items on archetypes content, so if someone is interested in that, that's certainly something that could be done. And then just the basics about it. This is a page from our site. Alec Mitchell was the lead developer on this one, and the repository is in the GitHub Collective, so that's where you can find it. So, yay, related slider. I was very excited. That came together a little more quickly than this one, which was kind of, Chris can tell you gory details, but that was kind of a little more challenging to develop. So I was kind of doing all this work on the site, creating the content and the lead images and all this stuff, and setting up all the related sliders that I wanted for everywhere. And there was like no isotope add-on and no isotope add-on. I'm starting to bite my finger. But then at the end, there was an isotope add-on. It was like, bam! It was like one page, and it all just worked. So that was pretty awesome. So what this is, it provides a new view for folder and collection types in the Plone app content type of types that uses the Isotope JavaScript plugin. The Isotope plugin has an open source license. We toyed with another plugin that didn't have such a good license, so we chose Isotope because we can just use it without any faulty raw. And now I'm going to give you a little demo because the rest of this talk is not going to be meaningful unless you actually see what Isotope does if you're not familiar with Isotope. So this is just the metaphysi.isotope, the Isotope site. And it's just a little demo, and it gives you filtering for sort of small numbers of things. So, I can look at the metals, or I can look at the transitional elements. I can sort by the name, or I can sort by the symbol. So the basic idea here, it's kind of similar in concept to like a faceted search that you can set up with EEA faceted navigation, that kind of filtering. But when you have a small number of items, not hundreds, like we use the faceted navigation tool a lot on a lot of our sites, but those are big sites with lots of content. When you have just a few content items, hey, it's more fun and more sexy to have this little animated behavior, JavaScripty behavior. So we wanted that. We'd seen it, and we wanted that, and we had the perfect situation where we don't have that many projects. Look at that. I can't really see them. There we go. And we wanted to be able to filter them by, like, well, what are our cloud hosting projects? And of those cloud hosting projects, which one are Plone projects? And of those Plone projects, which one are in the education sector? So that's what it does, which I'm just very excited about because it is exactly what my sort of vision of what we wanted to use here. And I think it's an incredibly useful thing that hopefully other folks will be able to use. So, details about it. It provides vertical and tiled formats. You saw the tiled formats there. You can also do essentially like if you don't have an imagey sort of thing that tiles, you can do more like a traditional collection or folder view and just enumerates the title and description of the items. Uses the catalog metadata columns for filtering. Obviously, that's already there. Chris didn't have a chance to add dynamic sorting yet, but that's all comes with Isotope, so that we'll be able to add that in the future. There are site-wide settings that you can configure for all the Isotope views on the site. You can control which of the metadata columns to make available for your filtering. You can give them custom names, so it's a little more meaningful to your content editors, such as me. You can choose among 3 different layouts that Isotope supports. And if you have questions, I'm going to gloss over these, and if you have questions, Chris will answer that later. And then there are tons more for configuration, well, not tons, but there are more configuration settings that Isotope supports that can be added in the future, and we hope to do that. 2 slides of these are the site setup settings. So here's where you control the filters that are available. And then scrolling down from that, that also lets you control the label. So, instead of having industry, I called it vertical, just et cetera, that kind of thing. And then here's where you would control the sorts if there were sorting, which there isn't yet, but there will be, and the layout mode that I just described. Excuse me a sec. There are also configuration settings for each collection or folder that you use this on. Specifically, which of the available filtering columns do you want to use? And that looks like this. In the future, which sorting columns you want to use. Chris says the structure's all there. It just doesn't work yet. So that's how, you decide which filter things you want to show on this particular page. Very, very easy to configure, as you can see. Again, this works on dexterity types now, but it could be extended to work on AT types if people would like to use it with AT types. Excuse me. So now we've got all the building blocks. How do we put this together? So I'm just going to do like a kind of a quick run through of what sort of it took, what was the process we used to actually set up the site that I used. I mean, the developers are up there developing these wonderful tools, and then I basically built a site from scratch in Plone 5 using this, because we didn't do any kind of migration. We just wanted to ditch our old site and pull over the content that we wanted. So tabula rasa was great. So there are some things I needed to do to sort of set things up to be able to use these groovy new tools, mostly to do with these lead images that we've been talking about. So the first thing, you need to define the crop sizes that you want to use to fit your design. For us, the related slider and the Isotope plugin used the thumb scale, so we defined that scale to fit the design that we were going for. And then the collective cover tiles that we have use the preview size. So it's actually a pretty similar size, but it's a different aspect ratio. So those were the 2 crops that we set up the definition for. Then blah, 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 add all the content with images, projects, team members, add their images, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then as you're adding these images, and some of them are just plain old images on the site, as you're defining that, you need to use a cropping tool to actually create crops for each lead image. Because, for example, for projects, the lead image for the project is a kind of a big screenshot of what that page looks like. But for the little related slider view or the isotope view, that would be very small and kind of meaningless. So I wanted to make a crop that sort of featured the gist. Like for the KCRW site, it's this complicated blah, 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 tiles everywhere. But for the related slider, I wanted to show KCRW and just the beginning, so people would know what that was. And we didn't have to have any mouse over, title, or description. It was just very clean, just showed the picture. So use the cropping tool. The site setup is a little confusing currently in Plone 5 about your image settings, but it's the image handling settings panel that you want, not the other image. I think it's image cropping. You would think you would go to image cropping, but no, it's image handling. And I don't know why. Alec can tell you why. There are these 2 sort of confusing image handling things. I didn't mention that in my Plone 5 comments, but that was a little confusing to me. But anyway, you'll need to do it once. Here you can see we just made large, very large. Set up the preview and the thumb. Mini tile and icon are kind of what they were before, and we aren't really using them on this site, so I didn't bother to make crops for them. And this is just a screenshot of a portion of the Plone app image cropping tool. If you've never used it, it gives you tiles of all the different crops. So this is just 3 of them. The other 3 are up above that, or 4, or whatever it is. So it shows you, whether it's been cropped or not. It shows you what it looks like when it's cropped, and it gives you this little working area to create the crop. So as you can, this is an example of what I was saying, where the Jaskarta site has a screenshot that's bigger, but I just wanted to sort of show the key that it's the Jaskarta site that shows in the related slider and have it be readable. So that's kind of how that works. I will add some comments here, though, pausing for my rant on Plone app image cropping. This is an absolutely awesome tool. If you're working with lead images, you need this tool. Any kind of visual site which is relying on these kind of tiled or whatever displays, this is an essential tool, and I really think it should be in core because it's so obviously needed that what Plone does with automatically scaling images is great, but you really want the different crop sizes to look kind of different in a lot of sites. So this is a fabulous tool. But it needs some work. I have to say, over the last 2 or 3 weeks, I have gone through and recropped all the projects on our site, probably 3 times, because it keeps losing the display of the crops. It doesn't lose the cropping information. Like that window at the bottom still shows. If I click on preview, it shows me that cropped. But looking at the preview, it lost the cached image for that, and it just, so, I'd be doing stuff, and I'd add stuff, and all of a sudden, the related slider images would have reverted, or half of them, or one of them, or it was enormously frustrating, and Alec Mitchell's been helping me try to debug this, and it's enormously frustrating for him because it's something I'm doing. He can't duplicate it. It's the way I'm managing content and making these changes, and there's something in there that's losing this cached image. It's so bizarre and so frustrating. So that clearly needs to be fixed for this to be ready for prime time. The other thing that needs to be fixed is it's very sensitive when you switch. If I've just finished cropping the preview size, and now say I want to move on to the mini size or some other size, so I would then click on the mini size to crop that. Even though if I just immediately before saved my preview, it won't complain. But in any other circumstance, if I click on mini, don't make any changes, then click back on any of the other things, it says, oh, you're about to lose your changes. So it just complains about that. You're about to lose your changes way more than it needs to, which meant every time I had to go and redo the crops for each project, it was like 13 mouse clicks to go here and go there, and then, yes, I really want to make the changes, and then, and I had to do the crop, and then I had to shift reload to make sure it really, so. That is the end of my rant on Plone app image cropping. I hope that people will fix this tool because it is awesome, but it needs some love. All right, so now we have the building blocks. Let's make some landing pages. Create a cover for the landing page. Create a layout for that cover. Every different page is kind of different on our site. And add content and images to the cover. This is not going to be a talk primarily about collective covers, but for those of you who've never seen it, this is kind of the gist of how it works. The layout section is sort of separated from the content, adding content to the thing you just defined section in a not completely logical way. I have a certain amount of feedback that I'm going to be giving to Hector about that, but here's the layout editor. You can add rows and then add columns to the rows, and then choose what types of tiles to go in those columns. And for us, it was always either basic tiles or rich text tiles. And then on that little wheelie gear thing, you choose the CSS class to use. That's where you choose the CSS class, and this is, of course, critical for our site. And I'd like to do something, and I choose the wrong CSS class, and oh my God, why does it look wrong? So it's fussy. It's fussy to set that up, for sure. Then you go to the Compose menu, as it's called, and you add content. That Add Content button, if you click on it, brings up a little control panel where you can navigate through the site to the content that you want to add, and you can just drag and drop a content item, like for Plone websites. This is a cover tile for our which one is this? I can't remember. Homepage, I guess. Anyway, they all meld together now. And actually this, yeah, so just navigate to this. So I wanted the Plone websites thing to, point people to our Plone website section of the site. And so I drag and drop there. And then some other areas of the cover, I just wanted to use images. So I just use essentially HTML in the rich text tile to bring in that image, which by default does not give you a rich text editor, so that's a little tedious. But. And then here's the final product. Yeah, I guess this is our homepage, right? Sliders. You create the related content criteria or the add related items manually. Add the slider title, enable the slider. Boom, you're done. Once you have all this stuff lined up, it's pretty easy. But you do have to go in and set the collection appropriately for each content item. I already showed you that. Isotope views, again, boom, easy. Create the collection, configure which filters you want to use, set the display to isotope view. Whammo, you're done. Awesome. So just a couple reflections on Plone 5 real quickly. This is not what this talk is about, but since this is the right audience, I thought I'd throw it out there. From the content editor point of view, that's me. I liked it. It was a good editing experience. There are, definitely an improvement. I like it a lot. There are a couple glitches. I hit the view button instead of the edit button, or vice versa, probably 500 times in the last few weeks. There's something about the placement of those things. I don't know if it's just me, but we were talking on IRC, and a couple of the other guys had the same problem. So I think there's something illogical about the ordering of those buttons, like should maybe view be up next to contents because it's more like a looking at thing, and edit be below it? I don't know. The more critical thing is that there's no allowance for add-ons in the Groovy toolbar thing. So for collective cover, it's got this compose and layout function. No icons, no way to add icons, the team told me. This is also true for the add-ons in the site setup, but that's minor. You can always see what it says. But on this, how I started out just using the icons because I wanted to sort of minimize it. And it was a pretty funny little experience I'm like, well, how do I set the aliases on the site, the redirects on the site? And I go to the aliases tab. I'm like, what aliases tab? And because I had minimized it, I had to mouse over it to have it appear. It's like this mystery functionality that does not appear. So that needs to be fixed for UI to be really usable. From a developer point of view, I didn't really get any complaints. One or two people thought that the new resource registry UI was confusing, but there was not really a lot of negative feedback on that. From the theming point of view, I thought this was interesting feedback because how we've been like, Plone 5, easier to theme. So I wanted to specifically get some feedback on that. And this is a feedback mostly from Alec, Malik Mitchell, who did most of the theming. And the new markup on the Barceloneta theme definitely made theming easier, and working with less is a great win. So that's totally awesome, and he found that very easy to set up. However, when he came to the point of making the site responsive, which, with all these tiles and stuff, we have a lot of we're setting breakpoints and shifting from, 3 across to 1, all that kind of thing. He found that the editing toolbar seriously made things more difficult. In fact, he complained a lot. I have a whole rant from Alec. So it's the way it's there makes it sort of this fourth column that you have to. So it's not totally sitting on top of. It's actually enough in the page that it's a fourth column that you have to take account of when you're setting up your breakpoints. So he's got tons of special cases, he said, in the code to account for this. So that's kind of too bad because we want it to be really easy. And it sounds like there might be ways to make it easier. So, et voila. We don't have much time, but if there's one or two burning questions, we can capture on video, and then we can do hallway questions. One burning question.
Hello. I was just wondering, what made you choose collective cover instead of Plone mosaic?
We were familiar with it. We knew it worked. We didn't want to go with the bleeding edge. And it's also a tool that's very familiar to us, and we feel is extremely useful. It's been in production on a lot of sites, including our sites, for a long time, so we're very comfortable with it.
Thanks.
Paul has a bleeding question? A bleeding question, a burning question.
First a small question. Does collective cover already work with Plone 5, or
does collective cover, what?
Work with Plone 5, or did you do something magical to it that isn't?
We'll let Chris answer that one.
There is a branch called Plone 5 that works.
Yeah, we had to do some magical things.
We're trying to figure out how to support both at the same time.
Yeah, the trick is to get it all into, yeah.
And the second is on the toolbar responsiveness. Would it help if you just have it horizontal?
We talked about that in IRC the other night. Let me give that, and then you can add on. I said to Alec, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was making your life so hard. I could have just had it up at the top. That wouldn't have been that big a deal. He said, yeah, if it was up at the top, that would be totally easy, but he said, I didn't want to design it to set up the theme to only cover that case, since I knew it was possible to switch it. So as long as it's possible to switch it, he had to do this faulty roll. But yes, it would be way easier.
I also think, at least from my standpoint, Alec blazed the trail in terms of setting up all the breakpoints and knowing how to set them up. There are, in fact, CSS classes that you can use that allow you to set up the breakpoints properly. I think if there's good documentation available on what those breakpoints need to be and how to set them, then it eases a lot of the burden, because it's just, setting 5 breakpoints is a little bit difficult instead of only having to set 3, but it's figuring out that you have to do that in the first place that was a little bit, that I think was really tough for Alec.
But he was pretty unhappy. You weren't on IRC last night when we were going, and I have, in fact, if anybody wants, we have this comments from Alec. I mean, it was like, he said basically it would have been impossible to do without less.
Yeah.
That, it was just a super pain in the neck, and yeah, he ranted quite a bit about it.
Yeah. It did not hurt me anywhere near as much with Isotope as it did for him with the slider, and I'm not entirely sure why, but I think a good deal of it has to do with the fact that he bumped into all the invisible walls first, and I just kind of copied what he had done.
Well, it was more, it's tough to make a width responsive UI when there's a variable width edit bar stuck to the left side of the screen. It would have been impossible without less joules, blah, blah, blah. If it were actually separate, absolutely positioned and just transparent, then you wouldn't, you shouldn't have to make a dozen special case rules, right?
Well, except that you also want to be able to see the entirety of your content at the same time that the toolbar is open.
Maybe,
and I don't
think that's true, actually. I would be happy to have a toolbar that overlaid and then folded up when I wanted to see the whole page. I think it needs some usability love here to decide what's the best approach, because it shouldn't be this hard. Even if you blaze the trail, it was the first time, blah, 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 good documentation. It just shouldn't be so hard to set those breakpoints, I think. We want to make Plone, super easy to do responsive theming. Yeah. This probably are we pretty much out of time at this point, or you want to do one more? Okay, one more, and then we're gonna go to the hallway.
Who's maintaining Plone image cropping?
I don't know the answer.
I don't know the answer to that, I'm sorry.
So, are there tickets for the issues that that you encountered, even though
You know, I
they're,
wrote-
like, magically
I
disappearing?
have tickets in our issue tracker as I was encountering issues. Well, they're just those two big issues. But I didn't know whether it was just us or whether we had a branch or what. But yeah, we should definitely move those to the, and we actually uncovered some Plone 5 issues, which we've added to the appropriate issue trackers. We even fixed a couple Plone 5 issues as part of this project. And yes, we will definitely move issues to the appropriate issue trackers, but I don't know who's the owner.
I think in this case, we would like to try and figure out exactly what we're doing that's causing the problem before we put an issue in, just so that it's not like this.
Chris says that
maybe
we'd like to figure out.
Maybe other people have the same issues and they know what you did wrong. So
That's a good point.
Yeah, Chris says that
it always
we want
happens to me if I do blah, 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 something like that.
Yeah, that's the trouble. It's not like, if I do blah, blah, blah. It's like, what did I just do? Anyway, let's move the other. I'll hang around up here. If you have more questions, come on up. Thank you very much.